Hi there, I'm Richard Bell, and this is my presentation on the science of reading. The goals of this presentation is for the viewer to be able to produce an informed summary of the science of reading by the end of it, and to be able to understand a cursory level of its origin, and to see and understand its applications and implications in the classroom, especially as an Arkansas educator. So what the science of reading is a culmination of evidence-based research from various fields, including but not necessarily limited to neuroscience and educational psychology, regarding the study of how humans understand written language. And as educators in the state of Arkansas, it's a statewide initiative that we are really pushing to draw from this research and to make a better informed literacy instruction, especially better suited struggling readers in our schools. We have a big problem with literacy in Arkansas, and this is our attempt to fix that. And has provided neurological context regarding reading and education, and has opened doors for more targeted, effective instruction for student success plans. We've actually been able to take fMRIs and EEGs and EKGs and the results of that, and we've been able to isolate the instances of reading comprehension in the brain and what that neurological pattern looks like. And we've been able to establish what is where when we're regarding reading comprehension better or worse. And that's allowed us to actually target where students' deficiencies might be and address them. Inside of the science of reading, there are 4 theoretical models, and this is the big one that's kind of the umbrella of everything, and it is called Scarborough's Rope, and it was invented by Hollis Scarborough after about 20 years of brain research. They developed this Anagulus model to detail the complexity of learning how to adeptly read. It's got 2 main braids. The bottom one is word recognition, which is generally what we associate with phonics, and phonological awareness, which is essentially the ability to manipulate certain aspects of oral communication, like syllables, sounds, rhymes, and phonemes, which is individual sounds and words, and there's decoding, which is able to know that a certain letter in the alphabet means a certain sound, and the alphabetic principle. And then also sight recognition, which is basically a body of automatically recognized words. And so the goal as an educator for us is to take these 3 things and build upon them and continue to build an automatic instinct towards them, and they need to become more and more automatic to allow fluency to occur. And while we're doing this, it is tantamount that we also work on language comprehension, which is the top braid. And it contains 5 things, which are background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge. All of these things that provide a background or a foundation for us to draw meaning from the decoding that we experience whenever we take in printed word. And we want, as educators, to increasingly inject this instruction in a strategic way that works together with word recognition to eventually tighten up, as you see in the model, and achieve skilled reading, which is fluent execution and coordination of word recognition and text comprehension. And so to diagnose where the student might have a deficiency in that, we often turn to the simple view of reading, which takes the 2 main braids, essentially, which is decoding and language comprehension, and then adds a value to them. It was invented by P.B. Gao and W.E. Turner in 1986. It is in response to the idea of the whole language model, which was basically using whole words and using the context around those words in picture books and chapter books and things like that to derive meaning from them, and kind of understanding of what the word means through everything else around it. This is a lot more an advocate for code emphasis, and as we come to find, code emphasis is actually the winner of the great debate, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It offered empirical evidence, establishes values to 2 realms of skilled reading, decoding comprehension, and it assigns values to these. And so if there's a deficit in decoding and a higher score in language comprehension, we know we might be looking at a sign of dyslexia. Conversely, if we see a higher score in decoding than we do in language comprehension, we might have a case of hyperlexia. So we set up an equation We have two aspects that have two values. The easiest example is 0 and 1. And depending on the presence of a 1 or a 0, depends on what reading deficit we might be looking at. A general low score in both of them is usually run-of-the-mill or garden variety reading disability. And so this really allows us to diagnose what we're looking at when we look at a student's struggles with reading. And it also reminds us that reading is something that is not inherent to us as human beings, like spoken language, and that's the reason that it's so difficult for some as we're rewriting a circuit to co-opt the speech centers of the brain to link visual code to the working model of foreign language in the brain. This model is intended to identify those deficits in individuals building that circuit. Moving on to the 4-part processing model. The 4 processors: contact processor, meaning processor, orthographic processor, and phonological processor. And it's really great for us as educators to use this. It really influences direct instruction. In fact, that's its intention. This model is very applicable in the classroom. It advocates for teaching many skills at once and allows relationships to form in every system through the development of neuronal pathways. Direct instruction is responsible for building and strengthening those pathways, and through assessment, we can derive how successfully engaged these processors are in the student's journey to fluency, which is tested through oral reading and retelling. The next one is Airey's phases of word reading development. This has a lot to do with the bottom braid of Scarborough's rope, or decoding in the simple view, and works in a series of 4 phases. It's a kind of a lucky number for the science of reading in that there's 4 phases. It depicts how reading and spelling develop from pre-alphabetic to consolidated alphabetic. These are not hard stages, but they kind of pass like a phase. You can kind of see there's crescendo in the first 3 phases, sort of on how this is modeled, and then there's a big, like, sort of ta-da whenever we achieve consolidated alphabetic. For a quick example, for pre-alphabetic, my son, who is 2, recognizes that the giant image of a pizza above our favorite pizza place means Zaza, or he associates it with the food pizza. And that's a sign of pre-alphabetic. And then when you go on to early alphabetic, he actually might recognize the word or pizza as meaning pizza. That might even be in later alphabetic. It would be really amazing if he was 2 and could read the word pizza. And then moving on to consolidated alphabetic as being able to look at a word like information and pull its morpheme out as in form and be able to derive meaning from that using decoding. I want to talk about fluency for a second. So when we talk about fluency, we're talking about the ability to express oneself easily and articulately, but we're also talking about the amount of energy that a reader spends on gleaning information from what they read, from the written word. Fluent readers are able to automatically ingest the information that is presented in a printed word and are able to focus a lot of their energy on the actual concepts and the learning comprehension in the top part of Scarborough's rope. And then a lot of the word recognition and decoding and everything like that becomes second nature. And so whenever we're talking about fluency, we're talking about building kind of an automatic relationship between these two things, and it allows us to have a more critical and deeper thinking about the visual code that we are in the moment processing. And so when I was talking about code emphasis versus meaning emphasis, there's this long-standing argument between 2 thoughts about teaching reading. Code emphasis, which this is a definite advocate of, relies heavily on a specific set of words or sounds used or a code, and a specific lesson is taught around that specific code. So like CVC words and things like that. Dr. Seuss is a really good example of that in early education, I believe. And then against that, as an antagonist to that, we have meaning emphasis, which relies heavily on context and whole word reading to increase fluency. I feel like I myself was educated this way. We were given a lot of books that had a lot of simple words and were easy words for us to recognize, and then the harder words we were able to, and we were encouraged to derive meaning through context. It was the same way when I learned French. We actually had kind of a whole word meaning emphasis in that. Probably the reason I didn't learn French so well. But yes, so the great argument in the mind of the science of reading, using evidence-based research, has kind of rebuked the meaning emphasis, and we have since moved back or moved on to code emphasis using the science of reading. And then orthographic mapping is actually what we're talking about when we're talking about co-opting the parts of the brain that process spoken language and allow us to build a fluency as oral speakers into using the visual code of print. It usually starts in the parietal lobe, which is right here above your ear, and it works back to your occipital lobe. And there's a neural pathway that needs to be built right here and right here. And the fascinating part about that is we as instructors are a direct responsible party for the formation of that. In conclusion, and I know I'm over time, the aforementioned theoretical models, including the science of reading, allows us to give teachers a set of diagnostic and responsive tools, set in evidence derived through scientific testing, and better teach students to read regardless of their deficiency. It also points out in a wonderful sort of way, and this is what's so important to me, I guess whenever you're a family consumer science teacher, you really think about the hearts of your kids. And it's that reading is a newer convention in the scale of human existence compared to human language, and that the co-opting of the speech centers of the brain is an extraordinary phenomenon, actually. And it is no wonder that struggles can happen during the neurological circuit building of a skilled reader. It's actually kind of a miracle. That's the end of my presentation. Here are my works cited. Most of it is derived from the actual professional development we're required to take as educators. Thank you so much.